Hey, welcome to The Explainer, where we get into the nitty-gritty of big ideas. Today, we're going to tackle a question that seems super simple on the surface, but has massive implications for business, for law, for everything. How do you actually define a market?
All right, so let's just jump right in with the question. If I ask you, what's the coffee market? What's the first thing that pops into your head?
For a long time, that was a pretty easy question to answer, right? You just think about what you see on the grocery store aisle. The classic face-off between ground coffee and instant. But things are way more complicated now. Is that an espresso pod you use in the morning competing with a can of cold brew? Or, and this is the real kicker, is its true competitor an energy drink for that morning caffeine jolt? All of a sudden, the lines get really, really blurry, and where you choose to draw them has huge consequences. I mean, get this wrong, and it can literally sink your business. Define it too broadly, and you could end up in court. So yeah, today we're digging into this surprisingly tricky but absolutely critical idea of market definition. So let's start where the stakes are super high, the legal world. For regulators, defining a market is all about figuring out who holds the power. When they're looking at things like mergers or potential monopolies, they have to draw a clear line in the sand. And the key concept they use, the one everything hinges on, is substitutability. It really boils down to a simple but powerful question. If the price of product A suddenly shoots up, what are people going to buy instead? The answer to that is what helps define the boundaries of competition.
Economists way back in the day, like Joan Robinson, had this really cool way of thinking about it. They imagined a long chain, a substitution chain, where every product is connected to others. But the strength of those connections, the thickness of the links, can be wildly different.
Okay, so here's the key. A market isn't endless. The boundary of a market is wherever you find a substitution gap, a place where that chain just breaks. Think about it. Coke and Pepsi, that's a super thick, strong link. But coffee and wine, that link is so thin it's barely there. That's the gap. And this is exactly what regulators are looking for. They find these gaps so they can draw a circle around a group of products and ask the big question. Is one company getting way too powerful inside this circle? Now that legal view, it's super important for sure, but it's also kind of like driving while looking in the rearview mirror. For business strategists, the people trying to figure out what's next, that's only half the picture. And that brings us to a much more powerful way of seeing things, through the customer's eyes. Strategists figured out that just looking at products was like trying to understand a book by only looking at its cover. Yeah, way back in the 50s, an economist named Lawrence Abbott basically said, hey everyone, we're thinking about this all wrong. People don't buy products, they buy solutions. You don't buy a drill because you want a drill. You buy it because you want a hole in the wall. The drill is just how you get there. Another guy, Calvin Lancaster, he actually gave this a formal name, consumption technology. And his big idea was that we're not really buying things. We're buying a bundle of features or characteristics that we then use to create an experience for ourselves. We're kind of like the producers of our own satisfaction. Just look at this table. It makes it so clear. A glass of wine and a beer, well, they both deliver the alcohol characteristic, so in that sense, they're competitors. But you can also combine either of them with a steak to create a single experience we call dinner. See? This way of thinking shows you how totally different products can actually be fighting for the same spot in a customer's life. And honestly, this one idea changes everything. It's the foundation of pretty much all modern marketing strategy. It forces companies to stop asking, what do we make? And start asking, what job is the customer hiring our product to do? And that means your real competition might not be the company that makes a similar widget. It could be anyone or anything that solves the same problem for the customer. Okay, so that's the theory. And it's brilliant, right? But how do businesses actually do this? How do you map out these fuzzy needs-based markets in the real world? Well, it all starts with data. A lot of the time, they'll use something called a product by uses matrix. Basically, researchers just go out and ask people, hey, for a quick snack, how suitable is a bag of chips? How about a bowl of soup? And as you can see here, you start to see patterns. Chips and pretzels, they cluster together as great party foods, while soup is off in its own little world. But you don't have to stop at a simple table. You can feed all this data into some pretty cool statistical tools that look for all the hidden patterns. They create a data-driven map that shows you the real competitive structure of the market. And what you get might look something like this chart. The analysis might show you something you'd never guess just by walking through a store. It might reveal that in the minds of shoppers, all diet sodas, doesn't matter the brand, doesn't matter the flavor, they all form one tight little competitive group. And that group might compete more fiercely with iced tea than it does with regular Coke. That's the hidden structure, the stuff you can't see on the surface.
So what are the big takeaways here? First, and this is huge, a market isn't some real thing you just go out and find. It's a concept that you have to define. Second, how you define it completely depends on your goal. Are you a regulator worried about a monopoly, or are you a strategist hunting for a new opportunity? And if you're that strategist, the most powerful thing you can do is focus on the customer's need, not the physical product. Because that means your biggest threat or your biggest opportunity might come from a place you'd never expect.
And that really brings us right back to the central question. So I'll leave you with this. Ask yourself about any company you're interested in, what market are they really in? Because once you can answer that question, you start to see the entire industry in a completely new and way more powerful light.